Hello and welcome to East Coast Ham Operators. For those of you who don't know our presenter, Steve Galchutt, who's just been speaking, he is an outdoor adventurer, photographer, and longtime QRP radio enthusiast with the call sign Whiskey Golf 0 Alpha Tango WG0AT. He has been a long-time SOTA activator, Summits on the Air, actually before it became a thing here in the United States. He's also a National Parks on the Air activator. Hiking the Rockies, as you've heard, Steve, he is the Alpha Goat, has been seen on YouTube videos hiking with his pack goat buddies Peanut and Boo, sharing his passions with the world in over 150 videos, entertaining, educating, and inspiring. He's known as the Goat Hiker, and I'm telling you firsthand, he's a swell guy. I think you guys already got a feel for that yourselves. It is my pleasure and privilege to present to you Mr. Steve Galchutt, WG0AT. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike, and thank the rest of you for joining tonight's presentation. First things first, let me share my screen and get the
There it is.
application, get the view up here. So, Mike, do you see the first slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So, where I live, by lucky chance, is right up against the Front Range of Colorado. Half of Colorado, actually, yeah, pretty much 60% of Colorado, north to south, is the Front Range of the Rockies. And to the east in this picture is the prairie. And I live at the base of this mountain called Mount Herman. That's Peanut Goat and my friend Bob holding the SOTA flag. And where I live is, the altitude is 7,000 feet. Mount Herman is 9,000 feet. So I've got a 2,000 foot mountain in my backyard, so to speak. So tonight, I'm going to talk about HF SOTA equipment, radios, antennas, and some operator tools. The radios I'm going to talk about are the radios that you can buy off the shelf. In other words, commercial radios. You're probably all familiar with the FT817, and now I guess it's the FT8 or 818 is the follow-on product. There's, from Elecraft, there's a group of radios called the KX series, which have a heads-up display and easier to read in broad daylight. Menus aren't as deep as the FT817. Also, the designer of the radio, Wayne Burdock, was a CW guy. So you know it's got to be CW friendly. And thus it's got a key or a paddle that bolts on the front of the radio. Some of the guys in some of the activators have taken to the Xiegu X5105 distributed by MFJ. And I frankly, I've never had the chance to play with one directly, so I can't really vouch for it. And there's a lot of buzz right now about the IC705, which was recently introduced by ICOM, but I haven't seen one or touched one. They're supposed to be delivering them here in September. And this Russian radio looks kind of interesting. It's only about an inch thick, but the display on it is really designed for bright sunlight, which would be kind of nice. It's also waterproof and dustproof. And the way they did that, these connectors on the ends of the radios are mil spec, and thus it's you know, you can take it outside and get dirt on it, run the sprinkler on it, and it still keeps playing. So let me get right into talking about the FT817 and some of its strengths and weaknesses. It's like a Swiss Army knife in that it does just about everything. 160 meters for 70 centimeters, all modes, 2.5 pounds, which is a little on the heavy side when you add a battery and some of the other necessary parts and pieces. It likes to drink up your battery at a 0.5 amp per hour, 500 milliamp hour on receive, and it lacks an ATU, but there's a lot of aftermarket ATUs. LGE makes one. Matter of fact, Elecraft makes one that plays well with a 817. And it's a pretty rugged radio. I granted that. Its menus are a little on the deep side for me at altitude, which is it typically above 10,000 feet where we play radio. You have altitude effects. You're getting 30% less oxygen, and it's known as hypoxia, which slows down the mental thinking process and sometimes affects decision making. So enter the KX3. It does 160 through 6 meters. There's a optional module that you can get for it. It'll put it on 2 meters. Again, it does all modes. It's it's a pound less than the FT817. Drinks less current on receive. Has a wonderful ATU, and of course, designed by a CW guy. It's going to have a capability of adding a paddle, plugging a paddle into it. And its form factor is designed for field portable operation with a heads-up display, so to speak. KX2 came out, a little brother. They kind of took all the deluxe feature, or reduced the feature set, if you will, ideally for what you would need in the field. 80 through 10 meters, 13 ounces, what's not to like? All modes, and again, they reduced the current draw on receive. Again, it has an ATU that is matched just about anything. So it's a plug and play radio. Throw up a wire, hit the tune button, and call CQ SOTA. Aftermarket, they came out with some side replacement panels that protect the knobs, also a Lexan cover that snaps in place. So basically, once you remove the paddle, you can throw this thing in your pack as is and not worry about it getting crushed or the knobs broken off or something. And both, as I said, both of the KX3 and KX2 have a great, excellent ATU. I found that by adding a 9-to-1 Balun, or UNUN as it's called, I can just about tune any of these dimensions: 29 feet, 35.5, 4158, 7184 feet, for 40 through 10 meters. Matter of fact, on using the KX3, it'll tune 6 meters. And there's a website, Ham Universe, talks about random wire lengths and ideal random wire lengths. By the way, I'm going to follow on with an email to Mike that he'll redistribute. It'll have all the URLs that I've talked about and some additional information, so you don't have to worry about writing down this lengthy URL. Anyway, they talk about lengths of wire not to use and these ideal lengths of wire that are easily matchable with a 9-to-1 Balun, using some of your antenna tuners that are even not as high performance as the Elecraft antenna tuners. So we also built what we call knee benches, because in the field you find yourself sitting on a rock or a log, or sometimes just sitting on the ground, and it's kind of hard to juggle your radio and have a place to write your logbook. And a lot of guys will just take a clipboard, but we went one step further with adding a elastic strap, that can go around your leg. Trick is you don't want to get that too tight, because all of a sudden your leg will go into cramps and you'll be dancing around like a fine Chinese fire drill trying to get rid of that leg cramp, while the rest of the pile is saying, where do you go? So this is a lot of the peaks that are fun to operate are above tree line, and that presents a challenge for putting up your antenna. So we drag along a mast, and here's Steve's putting up his mast for his end-fed wire. This is I-70 going through the Eisenhower Tunnel below, which is the Continental Divide. And we're looking down on these little ants crawling along on the interstate. And sometimes your antenna winds up being actually below you. Here you can see the red SOTA flag on his mast. So the wire is going uphill to Steve's trekking pole and then comes around and goes to the radio itself. This was a late fall activation on a 13er. It's 13,000 feet, and it's one of those days where it was perfectly calm. Well, there had to be a little wind to move the flag, but at that altitude, there's not much atmosphere, so it really gets warm. It's probably maybe in the 50s, but it feels like it's in the 80s because of the intensity of the sun. So umbrellas and hats are really, and sunblock are two key several elements that you need to have in your pack and be aware of. So where it all began for me, who was my inspiration? It was West Hayward, W7ZOI. And he and some fellow hams decided to do a field day on top of Mount Adams in Washington, which is an ancient volcano, elevation about 12,000, a little over 12,000 feet, and has a 8,000 foot prominence. Probably any of you been to Oregon or Washington have seen this mountain. They're actually sitting on top of the fire tower. This ice axe they didn't realize it at the time. They thought it was they stuck it in this old log. Well, it turned out, went back in the summertime, and it was the roof of the fire tower. So they're sitting on about 20 feet of compressed snow. They brought with them this direct conversion receiver that Wes had built, and a little transmitter that was crystal controlled, and that's what they used for field day. And I'm sure they got a lot of extra multiplier points just for the portability. Unlike the QRP contest, freeze your butt off, FYBO, they probably didn't get anything for the temperature or harsh conditions that they were working under. But I just thought, when I saw and read about this, I just thought, wow, wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, that was kind of the starting point for my desire to climb mountains and beep out Morse code from on high, so to speak. So following Wes later on in the 70s, technology improved, and he designed the Micro Mountaineer, and it came out in August of August of 73. That's this radio on top. The radio on the bottom was his earlier predecessor, the Mountaineer. And somehow I, later in the mid 70s, I purchased a printed circuit board for the micro mountaineer, and I built one myself, and that was the beginning for me of going outdoors and operating, taking my radio when I went backpacking, and having a lot of fun with it. This was a direct conversion receiver, and it had no filters. Matter of fact, all these crystals along the side here that's how you change frequencies. So if you haven't used a direct conversion receiver, it's kind of like a regenerative receiver. You could say it's all band. It hears more than you want to hear, but it's really kind of a fun experience, and it's fun trying to figure out who you're answering, or is the station you're calling on upper sideband or lower sideband, because you don't have sidebands. You're all band, so to speak. And anyway, it's a fun radio to operate. I built a keyer paddle for it, or a keyer. This is I don't know, it was a drink flavoring squeeze bottle of some kind, and you can control the speed, and then I use these beryllium finger stock pieces to act as the key switch, if you will, for the paddle. So some of the other radios I built and used in SOTA. Again, this is the ZOI Mountaineer, Micro Mountaineers, some Pixies and Rock Mites, 4 States, Cyclone 40. And then the designer of Elecraft came out in the early days through NorCal Club, the super simple transceiver, SST is the popular was called. And I built one, a friend of mine bought one as a kit, and put it together, and I just didn't have a young family. My hand budget was pretty tight. And so he loaned me the schematic, and I scrounged all the parts, and I built one Manhattan style. And it's really a neat radio. It's full break-in, and nice side tone to it. And it's got VXO, so you can tune around, I don't know, 40 kilohertz or thereabouts, which is plenty. And took it to the field and built in a little tick keyer, and it's a fun radio. And of course, Steve Weber and the ATS series, and then that morphed into mountain toppers, and it just keeps going. The technology improves, and they keep coming out with more fun kits that have making these radios feel like a benchtop radio in terms of having LCD displays and filters and band switching and RIT and all of that. Only thing that's missing, of course, is a tuning knob, but knobs get broken when they're in your pack. So when I go to the field, I like to have my Go kit with the radio, all the cables, the antenna, battery, and earbuds, and anything else that I need for that to be a complete station. And then one of the things I learned from, I was in search and rescue for about 15 years, and one of the things I learned about kits, or Go kits, is that there's always the danger of the part or piece that makes that kit play may not be in there. For example, we had an oxygen mask kit that went with the oxygen bottles, and we'd get back from a mission, and everyone's responsibility was to go through the kits and make sure that all the parts and pieces were there. And if something was missing or had to be replaced, it was red tagged. And if it had a green tag on it, that meant it had been checked and it was ready to go. So I've kind of developed that same philosophy myself, because I've been bit a number of times by getting to the top of the mountain and realizing my battery's still on the charger on my desk. Oh no. So recently, some of you may be familiar with QRP Labs and this QCX transceiver, which is a fun little kit. They Hans Sommer in the UK designed it primarily for getting youth involved in building their own gear, and it's all through whole components. There's firmware you can upload to it, and it's pretty remarkable. This kit is $50. I think it's $55 here in the US. The interesting thing is that he just recently announced he's got a mini QCX that's about 1/3 the size, but yet has all the performance. But obviously it can't be through whole components. So he's going to offer the boards pre-mounted surface mount, and then there's some toroids you got to wind, and obviously some through hole components that you've got to solder in to have a full operational. But it'll be functionally the same as this larger through hole component original QCX. It decodes Morse. It's got a nice heads up display. The only downside are they'll only come in one flavor or one band, but you can he'll probably offer them 80 through, gosh, I don't know how high in frequency. I don't think there's a 6-meter version, but I remember there's 15 meters QCXs and maybe even 10 meters. So while all this was going on, I was kind of customizing my gear. Repackaging is one of the things I like to do and make it lighter weight, and building paddles was kind of also one of my other passions. A good friend of mine started doing 3D printing, and he came up with this. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Pico paddles, but the manufacturer became a silent key, or one of the partners anyway became a silent key, and they stopped making them. And that paddle was seemed to be a real favorite amongst the SOTA guys. And anyway, I've been telling my friend he's got to start manufacturing these, and but he's not that active of a CW guy and has a family that he's doesn't have enough time, bottom line, or interest. And I kind of make some novelty paddles out of found wood and pieces that I've accumulated over time, and collect a lot of Steve Weber QRP radios, and then repackage them. Here I put one in a cell phone case, waterproof cell phone case I found at Walmart. But unfortunately, it's not waterproof because of the through hole. The holes I had to drill for the switches and whatnot. But it's crush proof. So I stow the paddle inside. I've got a battery. Basically, this is a plug and play radio. All I have to do is hook up an antenna to it, and it's crush proof when I throw it in my pack. And I've done some modifications and added paddles to some of my other QRP radios. Made a paddle out of on the insulated outside of a standard ring or tip ring sleeve connector, 1/8-inch stereo plug. I couldn't think of the name of it. And then finally, I've got a few novelty paddles that, for example, this my hiking buddy calls this a SOTA voodoo paddle. And actually it's a touch paddle. You touch its eyes to make the dits and the jaws. The PC board is up here in the vertebrae of the elk bone. And he convinced me that I needed to add some goat horns to it. So we cut down some deer antlers and the battery, of course, that runs it. The first time I plugged it in, I didn't test it before I got up on the summit, and I went and touched one of the eyes to, send a series of V's just to test it, and it locked up. And so I figured out that I needed to get the RFI out of getting back into the PC board, which was locking up the PC board. So a little demo here of how it works. So while all that was going on, I was learning how to wrangle goats. And here's Peanut not wanting to cross the river, which we needed to get across. I already got Rooster across. And goats are like cats. They don't like water, but they can adjust to it. As a matter of fact, one of the tricks in the goat packing group to get goats conditioned to water is to actually bottle feed them in the middle of a pond or a puddle, and gradually bring them out further and further into the lake or the pond where they're knee deep in it, so to speak. So I got Rooster and Peanut when they were yearlings and spent a lot of time with them. Here, Rooster smells the peanuts I'm about to bring out of my pocket. And they'll do most anything for treats. Rooster came from a goat dairy. Right here, you can see he's going to be a big boy just from the size of his legs and his hooves. Peanut came from a herd of 35 goats in a commune out in the desert. They were raising him as a meat goat. So Rooster was kind of the prince. Goat dairy people are real proud of their goats and have pedigrees and names for them. Rooster was actually named, gotta love him, Rooster Cogburn from the John Wayne era. And Peanut didn't have a name because you don't name an animal that you're going to eat. Actually, I think he did have a name. It was Arthur or something silly. And so, but he was such a scrawny little goat. He weighed 40 pounds when I got him, where Rooster was like twice that weight. He was more 70, 75 pounds. And they grow. They grow really fast. And once we established the pecking order, we went pretty much anywhere here in the Rockies together, and they rode in the back of my little pickup truck, and they would sleep outside my tent. Here, Rooster's guarding the back door of the herd, Peanut's guarding the front door, and I'm guarding the frequency, trying to wrangle the pile up on 20 meters. Actually, I spent a lot of time checking into there was a group of guys that had milk pack radios that hung around 14, yeah, I can't remember the exact high end of 20 meter sideband. And what I discovered is that there's a lot more people on sideband than there is on CW. So I started making use of the FT817 sideband capability and making a lot of QSOs on sideband when I was out goat packing. The goats at home live in a calving yurt, which is this plastic upside down, looks like a giant jello mold, has a vent on top, and then they live in it year round. They're pretty hardy animals. I've got some plastic drapes I put on this thing that for the winter time. But there is a pecking order to the herd. Here, Rooster and Peanut are following me. I'm technically considered the alpha goat. Rooster and I got into it one day. I was cleaning up the goat pen, and Rooster, I was bent over, and Rooster butted me up against the wall. So I turned around and I flipped him and sat on him for probably, it was not more than half a minute when he finally acquiesced and gave up squirming. And that was a signal to me and him that now I was the alpha goat, so to speak. So here you can see Rooster is pretty well loaded up, probably carrying somewhere in the area of 35 pounds. Peanut, on the other hand, these are bicycle panniers. I used to ride road bike and distances where you needed to be able to carry your gear. So I repurposed some old bicycle panniers and found the plans to build a wooden crossbuck saddle on the internet. And the same with Rooster. Although these packs are actually commercial pack goat packs that are available. And I've got, like I said, sandwich, jacket, and some survival gear. And off we go. Sometimes the goats would wander away a little ways, but not very far before they would stop and either plop down and wait for me, or but they always kept alpha goat in sight because you don't want to lose sight of your leader, so to speak. And poetically, this is that's Mount Adams in the background when we were up visiting some friends in the Northwest. This is Peanut and myself standing on, I think, a Sunrise Peak, which has a good shot of Mount Adams, where W7ZOI crew used to do field day. So the nice thing about goats is you don't have to bring any food for them, so to speak. So long as there's some green stuff growing, they'll just go down the trail and trim the trail as you make progress. And yeah, water is the lifeblood of anybody that's out in the wild. So they would tank up on that. And sometimes we pack through areas where there is no water. Peanut was the water caddy, and who pretty much shouldered the rest of the gear. But if one of them should go lame, the rest of us are going to have to pick up the load. That's why I carry a fairly light pack, and that would mean that we'd have to jettison some of the gear, and between me and Peanut, or me and Rooster, pick up the other goat's load. Funny story here. We were on a summit, a friend of mine, Chuck, K6UHB, and we were sitting in a cirque, a summit cirque of rock, which is actually kind of a little U-shaped pile of rocks that oftentimes people that get to the summit realize it's always windy or it's cold. They want to get out of the wind, and you're on a summit, so there's really no place to go. So they make their own wind block. And Peanut was standing on top of this cirque, and he bends over and says, "Oh, my lunch." And I said, "Excuse me," and pulled the sandwich away as if to say, "This ain't for you, buddy." And he pulls back and kind of ignores me, and we go back to rag chewing about the view and eating our lunch. And Chuck looks at me and he says, "Hey, you feel raindrops?" We both look up to the sky, and it's clear blue sky. And then we look over, and Peanut is releasing a urine stream that the wind is picking up and blowing on us. And Chuck says to me, "Your goat's peeing on us." And I said, No, he's not. He's just totally unaware. I mean, he was blissfully staring to the heavens and not even, I mean, it wasn't consciously on purpose. But he did get the reward of the rest of my sandwich at that point, since it had urine drops on it, and I wasn't too interested in finishing it. So what's in my pack? I carry survival gear in the form of a lot of extra layers, gloves, ski hats, bandana, down jacket, extra socks, micro spikes that go on the bottom of my traction devices, basically, so that we can get across ice and snowpack or loose snow. I double up on radios. I carry my primary radio, which is an APRS radio, so it's leaving breadcrumbs as I go. So my wife knows where I am in case all of a sudden the trail or the route stops and she doesn't hear from me. She knows where to send search and rescue. I carry a backup radio because batteries die, or we come across somebody that's injured and we need to communicate with them because we need to go get help, or one of us needs to go get help.
I just booked me a meeting around lunch. I said, well, I'll see what.
And tools wise, I carry a multi-tool. I carry a full tang 6-inch sharp knife, folding pocket knife, a lot of snacks. This doesn't show. This is 1 liter of water. I actually carry about 2 or 3 liters of water with me, sometimes more, depending upon the length of the hike. Navigation, my iPhone has a GPS app with maps on it, but I also carry a paper map and compass, and protection for the goats. It's a 38 that shoots actually 357s. I carry a bird shot just as the first stun shot, and the rest of the loads are 357 hollow points. And then a small a stun device that sounds awful. Actually, if you press it up against the skin, it feels awful too. And trekking poles. I would, a long time ago, I thought trekking poles were for old people, but I am old, and they keep me upright. So that's kind of what's in my pack. Additionally, I carry a tarp, and like I said, in the wintertime, this pack actually gets replaced with a larger winter pack. So summits on the air it's a physical activity as far as hiking to the summit, but once you get there, it becomes a sedentary activity. And all of a sudden you realize, what have you got to sit on? Rocks or logs or the ground? So bringing a seat cushion is primary. And I've gone through a couple of different makes, styles, and I found that the inflatable cushion, for me anyway, offers the best seat in the house. Once you get to the summit, you may find yourself sitting anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half. It depends on how active the pile is and how many how many bands you want to work. Is it a nice day? Do you want to stay up there and play radio for a while? Or is a thunderstorm about to crash down on you? So let's talk about antennas. For a while, I used to carry a buddy pole vertical, but decided that the weight of the buddy pole itself, plus coax, plus guy lines and support, I could cut down on that weight easily by just carrying wire. Dipole is really a great antenna. It's, I think, highly underrated. It's It does have some gain off the sides. You can, adjust its orientation, but it does need a center support of sorts. Vertical or end-fed wires, I found are really effective antennas. Matter of fact, it's almost the same as the dipole, except that you're feeding it on the end. And ultimately, an end-fed half wave became my go-to antenna. But jumping back to dipoles, they're 50 to 70 ohms fed in the center. You've got coax. You don't need an ATU, and oftentimes you can either find a center support or you can bring one along. And the other trick is using a linked dipole. The only disadvantage here is you got to jump up out of that comfortable seat that you've brought with and change the link, and remember to change the link before you change bands. So end-fed wire, it's a single piece of wire. It's easy to and quickly to deploy. Usually either a water bottle tied around the end of it, slung up in the tree, or something that you don't want to lose. I've left many of things hanging in trees because it wrapped around. Instead of lobbing it slowly over the tree, I gave it too much juice, and it, when it stops midair, it wraps itself around the branch. But the thing with end-fed wires, you've got this high impedance on the end that you've got to transform down to 50 ohms to keep your transmitter happy. And I did some investigation on the internet, and I had a mentor in New Mexico, KT5X, King Tut 5 X-ray, yeah. And he kind of coached me through this, and gave me information on how to build a transformer to transform that 5,000 ohms down to 50 ohms. Actually, it's 4,500 ohms. Anyway, so this transformer, then I built one and tried it out in the backyard, and it worked. And so I put it in a dental floss container and put a field-friendly attaching device on it, a binding post, and added some RG174, and bingo, I had an antenna. Took it up on top of Mount Herman, which is kind of my testing range for gear, since it's only 15 minutes from my back door to the trailhead, and about another half hour, 45 minutes hike to 9,000 feet, and played with it for a while. So this is the schematic. Basically, it's a 9:1 turns ratio. And there's discussion groups all over the internet talking about the finer points of building these. I've built another one in a little contact lens case. And this one is even smaller yet. I think this is a 3/8, but it's the same Coramix, a -43. And they work great. QRP guys have kits. This is called a no-tune end-fed half-wave matcher. And it's got a little chart here on the length of wire here for 20 meters. I know it's actually quite less than a half wave. A true half wave, about 32.5 feet. But QRP guys, there'll be another link I'll include in that email to Mike. So I got to thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to get up out of my seat and go change links or change lengths of wire on my end-fed tuner? And so again, I started with a fixed tuned end-fed matching transformer. I then researched traps, and on the web, there's a computer that if you give it a given impedance, in this case, I took a toroid and wound, what I thought was a reasonable number of turns that I could get on there and still leave me some room so I could expand them or compress them to change the impedance slightly. And then I took this number and plugged it into the trap computer, and it gave me the needed capacitor that I'd have to put in this LC circuit, because that's all a trap is a simple parallel LC circuit that is resonant at a given frequency, and the frequency that you want it to resonate at. And W8, I think it's W8JI, has a web page that talks about where the ideal frequency is for the band that you're trying to trap. And it's just below it by a few kilohertz. And so, knowing that, I could take I could take an antenna analyzer, and I could look at the resonant frequency of the trap, and I could either squeeze the turns or in some cases add turns, which I tried not to do because it got kind of messy, or take off some turns to raise or lower the frequency. And so bingo, I had a 3-band trapped antenna that I could leave up and not have to get out of my seat to change lengths or to change lengths of wire to work another band. And it only weighed 67 grams, which is just a little over 2 ounces. Here you see, I also built one of the tiny SWR indicators that you can leave in line, and it shows your SWR. This is also a variable, a tunable matching unit. And this one is a direct connect to the radio. The fixed ones that I built, I had a short length of maybe 5 or 6 feet of RG174 so that I could choose my operators. It gave me more flexibility of where I was going to sit, depending upon where the wire came back to my operating position. And that all fit in a repurposed sunglass case, and still only weighed 4 or 5 ounces. So you're on a summit, and you find a tree that you can attach your mast to, and then you find a good place to sit down and put your cushion up and get on the air. And getting on the air is the next chore in terms of if you held a party and you didn't tell anybody when it was, and send out announcements, it'd be a pretty lonely party because not many people would show up. So the key to summits on the air, for the activator anyway, is being able to self-spot or post an alert. And fortunately, there's a thing called reverse beacon networks, and there's all these radios out there listening for people calling CQ. And if you post an alert ahead of time, it'll match up the alert with the fact that you're calling CQ, and it'll post a spot. And that enables us to get on the air and have a bunch of chasers chase us when we're out in the middle of the boonies and we don't have any cell service or other means of self-spotting. So finishing up on antennas, I've got an arsenal of masts. These are telescopic, some are carbon fiber, some are fiberglass. and some are longer than my pack, which means that, you know, I'm going to be banging into limbs and stuff with it. But sometimes it's worth it bringing that really tall, long mast when you're going above tree line. Not have to worry about trees, but you know, you're interested in that height. And I've got an arsenal of winders, again, all wound with the ideal length for being able to match with a 9-to-1 balun to my AX series radios. And then I found that about 3.5 ounces, 2 to 3.5 ounces is the ideal weight to have at the end of the line, so I can sling it over a tree or get it up off the summit floor. By the way, it's kind of hard to figure the height where RF ground is on a summit, because summit, RF ground might be 100 feet below you, just because of the composition of the material. And, you know, summit is the highest point, and water is going to run downhill or evaporate. And so oftentimes a summit is really dry. And if the geological makeup of the summit is an insulator, the actual RF ground might be 100, 200 feet below you, which, you know, great. You can lay the wire on the summit. I have done that, actually laid the wire across some old bushes just to keep it off the rocks. And I got out fine. It was surprising. Every summit is different, and every summit seems like it's a learning experience as far as what antennas work or don't. So another little handy tool is a wire stripper. My dental hygienist says, I don't want to ever see you stripping a wire again with your teeth, because I had some notches in my front teeth. And she said, what's that from? I said, oh, I strip wires sometimes. No. Anyway, having a little multi-tool that can do that is really handy. Leatherman still makes these things, but I snagged one from Radio Shack many years ago, obviously. And it has other tools, you know, it's a multi-tool. The one thing it doesn't have, which my other little multi-tool has, is tweezers, but so be it. Tweezers are great for pulling out splinters or cactus thorns or a number of things. Anyway, so antenna analyzer is another great pocket tool to have on a summit. This is a SARC 110, which I think was $400 back in the days when it first came out. But nowadays, Walmart has one that's Walmart online has one that's like 35 bucks. The thing to watch out for, though, is the display. Is it going to play in bright sunlight? And we got plenty of bright sunlight here in Colorado. So another handy tool is big twist ties. There's Lowe's and Depot sell, under the name of Night Lights, these pre-cut ties that are anywhere from 2, 3, 4 feet long, and they sell for about $1 a foot or more. And they've got end caps on them. They're really nice. Walmart sells 16 feet of gear snake wire twist tie, and you can cut your own length. They sell this whole thing for $4. So it's, you know, what, 25 cents a foot? Anyway, this stuff is really handy to have. I mean, I think I've got a couple rolls of it in my glove box just for tying stuff on the rack, and also in case I don't have some on my pack, I cut some off and tie to the back of my pack just to make sure I've got some way to secure my mast once I get up there on the summit. Staying warm and dry is really important. I mentioned earlier about how summits on the air is a physically active as long as you're hiking and moving along on the trail. But once you get to the location, you know, you're going to be sitting for half hour, maybe 90 minutes. And It's that Mother Nature wind chill factor, and the fact that you may have worked up a little sweat. So the air conditioning effect of the wind on your hands that are bare skin trying to send code. It's important to have some kind of shelter. And the English came up with this idea of a bothy, which a lot of cyclists use to get out of the rain and warm themselves up while they're out there cycling. Amazon has these, they're about 14 ounces. It's the best 14 ounces I've ever invested in, and it keeps me warm. There's a breathe hole on top. I've used one of my hiking poles to kind of support the top, and then the other hiking pole to push out the end. It's got plastic windows that you can look at so you can keep an eye on predators and make sure that that grizzly bear isn't sneaking up on you. And it gets cozy inside because this is non-breathable material. It can actually get so warm that condensation starts building up and it starts dripping on your gear. But it's a simple solution. You can kind of lift one side and get some ventilation that way. And I wouldn't advise eating chili and beans the night before. You get pretty odoriferous in there. And particularly if you're going to share it with a friend. But we typically, it's one at a time. We take turns. The other guy is out dancing around, doing jumping jacks, trying to stay warm while the operator gets the cozy comfort of the bothy. Umbrellas are a handy tool as well to shelter yourself from the wind and your gear from the elements. This is a favorite summit in the Rockies called Chief Mountain. Actually, it's a fairly short hike and just awesome surroundings. You'll see more pictures downstream. Tarps are another great thing to have. And nowadays, this is a sil nylon tarp. It also doubles as a one-man tent. Using my trekking poles, I can support the center of it and stake it down and have a cozy one-man tent, although it doesn't have a floor, but for overnight survival, it doubles as a one-man tent. Also, it has armholes and head hole for becoming a poncho. So having a multi-purpose tarp like this is real handy. I mean, you could just wrap it around yourself to stay warm as well. And then there's times when the party must go on and you don't want to spend a lot of time putting up tarps and bothies and all that stuff, and you just want to get through it. Here was a short little storm cloud that came over and sprinkled on us for a short period of time. Steve just snapped on that Lexan cover on his KX2 and kept on operating until the pile was gone, and we called it a day. So what is this bear scat anyway? The goats and I were coming up on a mountain summit that was covered with raspberries. And the goats all of a sudden started acting really goofy. Actually, they were acting really nervous. And I think they smelled the bear. When we got up there, this scat, there was still steam coming off it. It was probably about 45 degrees out, and the bear probably heard us coming and did a nervous dump and took off. Anyway, so navigation tools. GPSs are a great tool. They run on batteries though. So you're best to bring an extra pair of batteries or bring a map and compass. Steve and I, K7, this is K7PX, I hike with him a lot. We both use iPhones and an app called Topo Maps Plus. There's also a company program that you can play on your PC or your Mac that allows you to lay out a route and then on a map and download it to your phone. So GPSs, smartphone apps, they're all good, but they run on batteries and sometimes, malfunction. It's best to carry good old map and compass and know how to use it. Also, I've learned it from search and rescue that just taking the time to look around and as you're hiking or walking through the forest and recognize what an unusual tree that is, or what an unusual rock formation, and kind of mark that in your mind and photographic memory, so that on your way out, if for some reason you don't have a map and compass and your smartphone is dead, has a dead battery, you can use your dead reckoning skills to get you back downhill to where your truck is parked. This is what the app looks like. And this particular day, this is where we are. We decided to bushwhack up all these contour lines through deadfall to the summit. And when we finally got up there, and the reason we dropped these waymarks is we wanted to make sure we could get back down that way. Once we got up to the summit, we decided we're going to walk out the long ways, which was the trail, which was the route that we had uploaded from past experiences. Even though it was a longer route, it was a lot more manageable because it was a trail. And bushwhacking is interesting, to say the least. Climbing over down trees and squeezing between rocks, and it's just not fun sometimes, particularly if it's looking like a storm's moving in. So chasing, why do people chase? It takes two to dance, and in SOTA, there's an activator and there's a chaser. And if we didn't have chasers, there wouldn't be an activation. The program would fail. So I kind of was wondering, why would people chase? So I went on the main North American SOTA Groups IO discussion group and threw out the question with a couple of possible answers that I kind of thought of myself, but I wonder why is that fun for you? So Larry K0RS, who's a big DXer, has a big station, has a lot of money tied up in antenna hardware and tower and beams and all that. He writes back, he says, chasing QRP stations with improvised antennas. He's talking about the stations that have improvised antennas. They're frequently on another continent is a real DX challenge. Pulling a weak signal from the noise teaches one how to get the most out of one's radio, as well as fundamentals of propagation and a dose of patience as well. His point is that, he's got this huge investment and a down solar cycle. What are you going to do when there's no DX to chase? Well, there's these crazy SOTA-tiers that are out there launching a signal, a 5-watt QRP signal, with a piece of wire slung over a tree. And for him, it's that challenge. So it's kind of interesting to read. Paula, K9IR, writes, when you're chasing summit activators, you join over 6,000. I think this number is more like 10,000 now, because this was several years ago. 6,000 other hands in the chase, nearly 4,000 who also activate summits. Enjoying making contacts and qualifying for awards without needing a superstation. And it's true. a lot of the stations that I talk to or that chase me have, you know, a wire over the garage roof or a simple dipole and a mediocre transceiver of some kind. And some of them are QRP stations running 5 watts, which amazes me. Yeah, and reinforcing Larry's statement, she writes, improves your ability to tune in and hear and work weak signal stations. Plus it helps the activator qualify for his minimum 4 QSOs. It takes 4 QSOs to get the points for the summit from the activator standpoint. And understanding how to use APRS, I'll approach that here in the next couple of slides. Anyway, there's awards. After 1,000 points as an activator and a chaser, you can you qualify for one of these awards. It's a piece of crystal that's engraved, and you can purchase these from the SOTA store. And you can, you know, if you were doing something unique, like all of my contacts for my first SOTA GOAT award was via QRP, and I mixed it up in terms of modes. I actually worked a little bit of sideman when I found my microphone, and CW, and there was some VHF contacts, but some guys do it all on HF or all on, my friend Bob just recently did that K0NR, all on FM VHF, and as did his spouse, Joyce, K0JGAW. So it's fun. It's fun to set goals and eventually achieve them. It takes probably about 100 to 150 summits to get 1,000 points. So some of the additional tools, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to hold a party, you want to send out an invitation. So there's a way to do that by posting an alert. This particular tool, SOTA WG0AT, is for iPhones and Androids, and it's handy to be able to look up and see who's on the air when you get on top of the summit, because there's another form of contact, and that's called a summit to summit, and you not only get your points for operating your summit, but you also get the points for the summit to summit contact in a different category. The neat thing about this tool is that you can see nearby summits and look up the information. Like I was doing this at home, so it's 2 miles west of my house. And then find out, you know, the details of the summit, like it's 9,000 feet. Oh, in the wintertime, there's a bonus season and you get 3 additional points for operating in the winter. I think that the management team came up with this to get all the SOTAteers off their duff and out playing in the snow. And it's worked, because it's, you know, you realize, wow, I can get, instead of 4 points for the summit, I can get additional 3, I can get 7 points for going and operating Mount Herman in freezing cold weather. Anyway, this was done a long time ago. Mount Herman now has 270 activations. 150 of those are mine, and 45 of those are this year, because once COVID hit, I stopped traveling long distances to get to summits, and I just went up Mount Herman about once or twice a week. So there's also a program called Ham Alert for iOS, for iPhone and Android phones. And it has some neat filtering aspects to it, where you can dial in a call sign and have it alert you if that person shows up on a summit, if you're, you know, wanting to make sure you work them. So APRS is a great tool. You can also use APRS. You can send a APRS self-spot. If you're in range of a digi, it can parse that message to the internet. Typically, when I park the car, I turn on APRS, it lays down a track of breadcrumbs, provided, again, if I'm within reach of a repeater that has the APRS capability and is parsing my signal out to the site, the website in Finland, aprs.fi. And my wife can follow me and track me and see that I'm actually out there climbing a mountain. I'm not sitting in a pub sipping a microbrew. So, like I said, it's a handy tool. Steve and I often will get out of sight of each other. I can look at my APRS on my HT and see, which direction he is, and also get a range as to how far away he is. Or I could just jump over to 5.2 and say, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" And because we both monitor the 146.5.2. Oops. So I do carry a Yaesu FTD2, which I think I lost on this last activation this week, which is sad. I went back yesterday looking for it and couldn't find it anywhere. And that's the second one I've lost, second expensive HT I lost, but that's all part of the expense of this crazy hobby. And again, on the web, there's a page, the SOTA Watch page, which is a very handy tool for seeing who's going to be out tomorrow, what time. Maybe they'll be out there at the same time you are, and you can make a summit to summit. Additionally, there's the spots page, which is, who's active right now, who's still may be active, and who was probably QRT'd at this point and either changing bands or eating lunch, and they may come back on again, but you never know. So it tells, what summit they're on, and if you mouse over that and click on it, it gives you more information about the summit, the name, elevation, the points, the frequencies on, etc., and sometimes a comment. So I'm just going to walk through some slides here. I think we're good on time, I hope. And if you want to turn the mic on and raise questions. We're sitting on a mountain called Signal Butte, and that's Pikes Peak in the background over there. Steve's hard at it with making contacts. He's got his umbrella to check that westerly wind you can see is, or breeze that's blowing. John is patiently waiting for his turn. And when there's a group of this, we take turns operating. We've tried separating from each other, but sometimes it's more fun to listen to the other guy trying to wrangle that pile of signals and try and figure out who's calling, and it's kind of fun to witness that. And when you separate out, you still get some interference from each other. So it's easier to sit and eat your lunch and wait your turn. This is Peanut Goat up on top of Sunrise, this is Sunrise Peak, and that's Mount Adams in the background. And here you can see his packs and the little crossbuck saddle that they made. There's a strap that goes around the front called a breast strap, and there's a rump strap in the back, and then there's also belly straps to keep this thing attached to them when they go flying down the trail sometimes. One of the fun things about en route to a summit is oftentimes you'll see wildlife. Here, this is on the road to Mount Evans, and Mount Evans, by the way, is a drive up. You can drive up to, I think it's 13.8 or 13.9, and there's another 100 feet or so to hike up a little trail. These mountain goats are, a mommy mountain goat and her offspring are licking the salt that's used to melt some of the snow off the road. They have a high need for minerals, and salt is one of them. So rooster goat is sneaking up on me while I'm preoccupied with, I think I was either, I'm not sure what I had in my hand at that. Anyway, he's while I'm distracted with my radio gear, he's sneaking up on, sniffing where my lunch is, and gonna do a lunch raid. So oftentimes, if you're on a public summit, this is Mount Evans, by the way. Oftentimes, if you're on a public summit, it's not a good practice to put up wires and guy lines and all that stuff, because people are going to wind up tripping on it. And matter of fact, the ranger, one of the local activators, Matt, K0MOS, who's now the regional association manager for Colorado, he was busy putting up a buddy pole Versity vertical, and the ranger came up and said, what are you doing? And he said, oh, well, I have my radio up here, and I'm going to put up I'm putting up this little portable antenna, and there's a program called Summits on the Air, and the ranger patiently listened to the whole spiel. Then finally, he said, no, you aren't. And Matt said, excuse me? And he says, you need a permit for that. And he says, well, how do I get a permit? And he says, between the hours of 8 on weekdays, you can go to the federal office downtown Denver and fill out a form and request a permit. And anyway, I think the ranger was a young ranger who was kind of bucking for his stripes, and they kind of got into it. And Matt backed down, though, realizing that he's not going to change the ranger's mind, and proceeded to get a permit. But the other trick is if you can operate without being caught, or having to ask for permission, or just going to a summit that's more isolated. Public summits like this are fun to operate, but and it's fun to interact with the visitors or the other hikers and explain what you're doing. And oftentimes, it gives ham radio a good name, but you don't want to give Summits on the Air a bad name by breaking rules or trespassing. And it's a quick way to get your points deleted. Matter of fact, the management team will purposely delete. There was one guy in Arizona that was boasting about, I climbed through a fence that said no trespassing, and we went and operated the summit. Boom, the management team reprimanded him and stripped his points. So Fred, KT5X, here is operating on top of a horseshoe mountain. It's a 13 or 13 and a half, I think, well over 2 miles above sea level in terms of elevation. His whole radio is attached to his mast, including the battery. This, I think, is the radio, and this is his antenna tuner. And sometimes, the reason for it is sometimes he likes to stand up while he operates, because he's not going to be there very long. Because he doesn't carry much in terms of gear. And his theory is that he'll outrun the storm if one is approaching. So and sometimes you run into other activators on summits. Here we were finishing up just having activated Horseshoe and Rooster photobombing the photographer here. And we run into Chuck and his lady friend. He was demonstrating Summits on the Air program. So I've got a one-man tent. When I go out and do an overnight, the goats crowd up against the side of the tent, and it becomes a one-man, two-goat tent, in effect. But they like to, since they can't see me, they like to feel or touch me and know that I'm there, which that's okay. It increases the air temperature inside the tent a few degrees, and they're happy and I'm happy. But you never allow a goat inside your tent because you'll never get him out after that. Here's Fred again, on top of another, I think this is a 14er, not sure which one, but you can see his end-fed wire runs up parallel to the mast and then runs off over here above the goat somewhere to a rock pile. And seems to be a go-to antenna for a lot of the SOTA guys.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
There are a couple of people who have questions, but you've got to tell the story you told us on Sunday when we were testing that the goats were seeking you one night. They abruptly woke you up in the wee hours of the morning. In fact, that was one of the questions. Somebody wanted to hear a story like this. So you know what I'm speaking of.
Yeah, we were on, actually this was on Mount Herman. It was wintertime and I was overnighting up there, and there was a blood curdling scream at about 4 a.m. I heard, and I thought, what is that? So I unzipped the tent, and both goats are plastered against the side of the tent like wallpaper. And I look out and I don't see anything and I don't hear anything again. So I strap on my headlamp and pull on a jacket, and I had some down booties that I usually wear in the morning. There was about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground. And so I got outside the tent and I made some noise in the general direction that I heard the noise from. And I finally realized it was a mountain lion. And there was no more activity there. I didn't hear any more noise. I didn't hear rustling in the bushes or anything, and there was no more howls. And so I said, okay, well, and I threw some rocks and made some loud noises and hollered, get out of here, and crawled back in the tent and pretended to sleep until it was daylight. And we got up, and once it was daylight, and walked out, and sure enough, we could see tracks that were circumvented all around our tent, and but not more than 30 feet. That's as close as the cat came. And I talked to a ranger. Later on, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's their MO. They won't come into your camp because it's too dangerous, or that's their perception. But their method of hunting is to get the prey on the run, and once they're on the run, then it's dinner time. And without that chase, it's not that interesting to them. But it's the chase and catching your prey, and then devouring it, I guess, is their standard practice. So it's a good thing the goats didn't decide to exit, but decided to stay, central to the herd, if you will.
Oh.
Steve, you had a question? I mean, Glenn, you had a question?
Hi, my name is Glenn. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi,
Glenn.
Steve. I'm a huge fan of yours. I've been following your videos for almost 10 years, and
Amazing.
I have a mountain topper with the case that was 3D printed here,
Oh, cool.
and a palm paddle, and all kinds of things. I've followed your antenna experiments with great interest and tried to replicate many of them. And I was curious I've only activated a couple of SOTA summits in Hawaii and one in Virginia that we did just a couple weeks ago. And I'm curious, with all of your experience on the mountains with your different antennas, when you're using like your 9-to-1 setup with the Elecraft auto tuner versus one of your tuned infeds, have you noticed very much performance difference? And how's the RF propagation on the mountaintop versus down below?
Yeah, well, number one, on a mountaintop, you've got elevation, and number two, I found that if the summit is a knife edge summit, that is, it's a really narrow peak, or if it's a pointed summit with a very small footprint, those summits tend to radiate really well, as opposed to a summit that's broad and flat. And as a matter of fact, there's some summits here that are like the top of a mesa, and you could play football on top of them. I mean, they're that long, and all of that is the activation zone. As you probably know, the activation zone is the height of the max height of the summit, and then 80 feet vertically down from the summit is also considered the activation zone. So you could walk down slope to get out of the weather or the wind, or in some cases, the summit itself is a pile of rocks that are 50 or 60 feet high, and they're technically unclimbable. So you wind up operating at the base of those rocks. And but I don't, if I find a summit it's a broad summit, I'll tend to go towards the edge or the edge of the cliff, and I'll set up close to that so that my antenna in effect is, at the top of the tower and has that great takeoff angle going whatever direction I find to be optimal at that point.
Interesting.
But I may have mentioned that before, the composition of the material at the summit, it's difficult to estimate where the RF ground is without taking a core sample and then getting into antenna modeling and measuring all that stuff. Over the years, I just found that trying to outthink it versus just throw the wire up and get on the air. And thank God chasers have really good ears, and they're willing to put up with QSB and all that. And oftentimes if it is a day where there's a lot of QSB, I'll send reports 2 or 3 times and repeat them over and over. And I'll also use reports that have using double letters or double numbers like 229 or 339 or 559 or 599, because when you repeat the number, there's a better chance that if you're down in the noise that they're going to get it, versus if you want to give them true accurate reports like 429 is more difficult to read in the noise than hearing 449.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. I'll pass the floor to others with questions.
So above tree line is pretty challenging environment. Every breath you take, you expire a lot of moisture, and the environment is just trying to suck you dry, basically. So good to have a lot of water. It's good to do a rest step every now and then. You can see Steve's water bottle here is in a side pocket on his hiking pants. But it's really fun. I mean, I've been all over the state now, and I see new locations every time we head out. The challenge, though, above tree line is to get that wire up as high as you can and to launch a signal. When I was in search and rescue, by the way, just interrupt me here. I'm just freewheeling if you've got questions. When I was in search and rescue, we spent a lot of time training to spend the night out, although we try to avoid that, particularly in the winter time, but we spent a lot of time training by building either snow trenches or snow caves. And there was a 3-day weekend around a Thanksgiving stretch of time that we had a lot of good snow here. And so in the backyard, it seemed like it was almost 2 feet deep. Well, I piled up all that snow on a Friday afternoon, and Saturday I built a snow cave, and there was a QRP contest of some kind going on. I might have been freezing your butt off FYBO, but I remember my favorite contact was with a guy in Jamaica who was sitting on the beach watching the eye candy walk by. And I guess they turned to him and asked him what he was doing. He says, "Oh, well, I'm talking to a guy in Colorado. He's in a snow cave where it's 30 degrees. And I came back and I said, yeah, I can imagine what it's like down there where it's probably 75, 80 degrees and people on the beach don't have many clothes on. And he says, yeah, I'm just sitting here enjoying my umbrella drinks and watching the eye candy. Anyway, so snow caves are amazing from the standpoint, there's no wind. The main trick, if you're going to sleep at it, is to create a bench here where I got all my gear on the bench is actually where I would be sleeping. And I did sleep in this snow cave overnight just for fun. But the trick is to make the roof and make sure it's stable enough. I used a chopstick, which is about 12 inches long, to stick through the walls at various places when I was carving it out to make sure I wasn't carving it too thin, because when you're on the inside, you could carve your way right through the wall and not know it. So, here's one sticking through the wall right here that tells me, okay, that's as far as I want to go. And another one up here, I actually use that as a tie-off point for the coax. But, and on your way to the trailhead, you tend to see a lot of wildlife. Here's some Rocky Mountain sheep, not goats, but sheep. And the views are breathtaking sometimes. Pikes Peak in the background. This is where the Hayman fire was, I think about 8 years ago. One of the biggest fire in Colorado history. And now we've got another one going that might pass that in terms of acreage burned. As I mentioned,
we've got a couple of questions since you were inviting. KM4IYQ, you had a question and a comment?
Yeah. Hey, Steve, this is Dudley over in Tennessee. Good to talk
yeah,
to you.
hey, Dudley.
Yeah. First, I want to thank you for all the emails and information on raising goats. I've got a pair myself. So, do the goats ever react strangely around other goats in the area, wildlife and things like that? And I wonder if you still had your pipeline to New Zealand.
Yeah. Yes, to both of those questions. Acting strangely, we have deer come through our property a lot. And matter of fact, we have one female doe that gave birth to a fawn. and kept it in the backwoods. And occasionally we would see the fawn out bouncing around, following the doe, and they'd walk right by the goat pen, and both Peanut and Boo would pretty much pay no attention to them. It's just another animal that grazes, and no alarm or concern about the fact it's just another prey. It's not a predator. But yeah, matter of fact, I worked John Shaw, ZL1BYZ, the day before yesterday from one of the summits up in the Terriel Mountains. And he was the first chaser. I posted the alert and was just tuning up, checking the frequency, sending QRL, asking if it was in use, and bang, back comes ZL1BYZ. And it still raises goosebumps on my arms when DX calls me from, Europe or South Pacific. Here I am, this little tiny QRP signal with a antenna wire in a tree, and they hunt me down. It's great.
Well, I do mostly chasing than I do activating, but my longest chase to date has been a gentleman over in Wales, England,
Wow.
from Tennessee. So that was pretty exciting.
Nice.
We had another person, Jim Long. You wanted to ask your question? You may have to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I hear you fine, Jim.
Steve, I'm one of your friends on Facebook. I just have loved your videos for years and your stories and the goats. You're a real inspiration to people getting out for ham radio. But I'm wondering if when you've been hiking along, if the goats have been seriously, I heard the mountain lion story, but do you have to be quite vigilant during the day when you're hiking along? And then the other part of that is I see a lot of pictures where you're wearing gaiters. And is that for snakes or just to keep your legs warm? And then as a doomsday radio, do you carry an inReach or something? Or is there always either 2 meters or 440 or simplex or repeater or your iPhone for you to be able to communicate in case there's a medical problem?
Yeah, let me address the last question first. And yeah, I do carry a inReach. I forget the name of the device. It's a it's not the GPS version. It's just the satellite communicator. And it's the older model that's about the size of your hand. They've since come out with the Mini, which is much smaller, and it uses your cell phone as the interface to it, which is kind of handy. But also, if your cell phone died, I guess it's still functional to some degree, but just not as easy to use. So yeah, having that satellite device, it adds another layer of safety, and it's also reduces another layer of worry for the XYL, knowing that I can holler for help if I really get in deep trouble, and or if there was a medical emergency, or if we run across somebody on the trail that is in dire straits and needs medical or helicopter rescue or search and rescue to come and drag them off the mountain. As far as the goats, Rooster and Peanut were pretty good about sticking right with me, right by my side. Wherever I went, they were right there with me, including when I had to go off in the woods and do my business. You know, it's kind of strange having two faces staring at you while you take care of business. But nonetheless, it was it's good company, and you know that you've got your herd is your herd, and they're always going to be with you. But Boo Goat, on the other hand, since Rooster passed away about 5-6 years ago, for a while I had some horned goats, but they didn't work out. They tried to, I mean, Peanut to begin with is bottom of the pecking order, but they really wanted to just get rid of him, and they ganged up on him all the time, and I decided horned goats are interesting, but having them as pack goats, you know, their guns are loaded and they know it, and whereas Rooster thought his guns were loaded, but he didn't have any horns, so it was a lot easier to deal with. And horned goats, you know, they can injure you. But where was I going with this? Boo Goat, because I got him when he was about 3 years old, the bonding is not as strong, and he's kind of full of himself, and at times he thinks he's the alpha goat. And when we go off, I'll be on a summit, and all of a sudden I look over and Boo Goat is gone. He's over hustling the local visitors or hikers for treats, you know, and they're taking pictures of him, and I'm going, wait a minute. So I've got to stop what I'm doing and go over and, you know, corral him and get him back over to our little setup, and then I break out the lead rope and tie him up to whatever I can find, and eventually he'll settle down and just take a goat nap. But there hasn't been any situations where you know, the goats are like another pair of eyes and ears. I mean, they'll let me know if there's a predator around. We were up on the side of one of the summits on the final approach, and I looked back and both goats had stopped, and they were looking down in the valley, and Peanut makes a little noise that tells me that, uh-oh, there's, you know, a predator. And sure enough, here these people were walking along, and there was a great big German Shepherd leading the group. And so, you know, when danger shows up, they hear it before, or see it or smell it before I do.
Mhm.
So I think that was the second question. What was the first one?
The gaiters, do you wear gaiters because of snakes or for snow to keep your legs warm?
The snake thing is not it's a big issue here in Colorado. You know, somebody like Keith, KR7RK, I think wears snake gaiters, which are actually thicker than the ones I wear. He's in Arizona, and, you know, rattlers in Arizona are synonymous. We do have some here, but I've only, in the 10, 20 years I've been here, I've only seen 2 of them, and they were on the road, dead as a doornail. But the reason I wear them is the warmth factor, and it keeps the stickers and the twigs and the rocks out of my boots.
Yeah.
And it's just become a uniform. I mean, when I put my gear on, I throw the gaiters on. And the times I haven't put the gaiters on, I had red ants crawling up my pants, and trying to manipulate the key at the same time, swat the red ant that's biting your calf. You know, it just becomes a real circus. So anyway, here's Steve at 20 degrees below zero on Pikes Peak. And his KX2 was still working. The Yellowcraft people were really excited to hear that because I think their specs go down to like 10 degrees or something. Anyway, this was like 30 degrees below their specs. So it was operating out of spec, so to speak, but still, it still kept on ticking. Give you a sense of scale. This road, actually it's this road that we traveled to come up, and then we come around the backside of the mountain, and the trailhead or the point of departure was right back here behind Steep's Pack. And we walked along the saddle, and there's a series of switchbacks that bring us up the side of this mountain. This is Mount Sherman, which is a 14er. And this was late fall. You can see all the aspen color in the foreground there. And 14ers actually tree line is at 11.5. So once you get above 12,000 feet, it's all rock. It's all just finely ground, decomposing rock. Back before SOTA came to the US from the UK, I was involved, my friend Guy, N7UN, and myself, we were doing an event called the 14er event, and that's where a lot of guys go out and operate, mostly VHF. And so we started doing it with HF and got a special call. N0 Bravo was our special event call sign that we signed up for. And here you can see on the summit, a bunch of college kids just hanging out and having a party up there. And we were downhill a little bit, doing summits on the air. Peanut Goat taking a nap, standing up with his packs on. Here's Steve, hard at work. Nice view from the office window.
Hey, what is Steve's call sign again? It just occurred to me, making these little bonds here. I'll have to put on my SOTA Goat app to get alerted. Of course, I know your call sign, and I think I've got Steve's written down, but one more time for everyone else. It's, is it K7PX?
Yes, Kilo 7 Papa X-ray.
Great.
And yeah, some of the chasers refer to us as, the Steves are out again.
Steve Square.
Yeah. So, and usually even in the summertime, oftentimes you're starting at the trailhead at crack of dawn, so to speak. And going through South Park, there's a herd of buffalo out there that we always run across. There's a road that runs across South Park, Highway 24, and come up over a hill and you'll see a whole string of cars that are all stopped, and it's like Yellowstone, it slows all the traffic down because people are taking pictures, so to speak.
Could I ask a gear question?
Sure.
So I'm curious. I have two gear questions. The first one is, what HT are you going to replace your lost Yaesu with?
Well, I've been eyeing the FT3D. I have a Kenwood that I've used for satellite work. It's not it's the D72, and it has a TNC in it and does papers and all that. But it's heavier, and the interface on it is not as clean or easy to use. I find it at altitude, my old brain just kind of does brain fade on, where in the menu is turning on a APRS to automatic, or, it's just whatever you get used to. But yeah, I would say probably the EFD3, although $350 is $350.
Cool. And then I noticed over time, it seems like you've done more activations with your mountain toppers versus your KX radios. And I'm curious how you feel about those two platforms for SOTA, or how you enjoy each.
They both have their advantages and disadvantages. I mean, the mountain topper is, well, they make a 5-band mountain topper, and I have one, but it's, there's something there, the sweet spot, and the money bands are 40, 30, and 20, and they're always open. They may not be as open as you would like, but I'll start out on 40, and sometimes if I bring the KX2, I'll even go down to 80 meters if I've advertised and send out alerts and maybe told some of my friends or been on the reflector and said, hey, I'm going to try 80 meters today. I know some guys that even try 160, which even the extended wire for that band. Of course, the tuner in the KX series radios will probably tune an 80-foot wire on 160. But and if it's nice weather and it's going to be, if you've been to the peak before and there's good places to hang antennas, sure, I'll bring the KX2 because it'd be fun to go up to 12 meters, 10 meters and see if there's any propagation and see if there's any DX. But my go-to is probably the MTR3 LCD. Just having that LCD display there that tells me what the battery voltage is, tells me what frequency I'm on. And if I got the radar on, it tells me if I'm plus or minus, a few kilohertz. And it's so small. I mean, a deck of cards. And the battery I take for it is about the size of I carry a little 9-volt, transistor radio battery as a backup in case all else fails. But the regular battery I carry is a 600 milliamp hour or a 1 amp millihour, and they're nothing. Like the old lead acid batteries that Rooster used to carry for me. So.
Very cool. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions out there? So it's fun to just sit on the edge of the summit and have great views and have a bunch of chasers calling you and handing out signal reports, and it's a great life. Sometimes we get SOTA fever. We go out for 2 or 3 days, base camping and letting the beard grow and telling jokes and kind of having our man cave time.
Excellent.
Friend Steve, sometimes when he gets to the top of a summit, likes to, his dogs are barking, as he says, and takes off his boots and makes himself comfortable. He knows how to relax. And this is the view from Mount Evans down to the visitor center, which is this little parking lot right here. And it's about a 3,000-foot drop from the max elevation of Mount Evans.
Wow.
This slide sort of speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
The fun thing about summits on the air, there's all these little challenges that you run into. Steve forgot his binding post adapter, and he's pointing to the BNC connector there, where he had a pair of fly tying, in his fly tying kit, he had a pair of sutures or clamps, I guess they call them.
Hemostats.
And so I used that to clamp the wire to the ground wire or the other side of the antenna to the BNC connector, and then it just jammed the hot lead into the hole of the BNC connector.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
do you always carry in your day pack? Do you always carry stuff so you can stay overnight if you're caught up on the mountain?
The bothy is my survival bag, if that's the case, but I also carry a little space blanket that is two-sided. I think it's called a thermal blanket, and it stuffs down into a little sandwich bag almost. And I've demoed that in the backyard a couple of times to make sure that it does what it's supposed to. And once you zip that thing up, get in it, it really gets warm pretty fast. And I would probably use that in addition to the bothy or my tarp that's multi-purpose tarp, that blue tarp I showed.
Mm-hmm.
And in the winter time, I do carry a stove. I carry a little solid fuel stove that I could, heat up, and that's in a cup, a titanium cup, and I could, in other words, melt snow or heat up a little cup, and I carry a little assortment bag of like bouillon cube, and I've even got a cup of soup that I've dumped into a plastic bag, and along with the bouillon cube. So I've got some stuff that I could heat up, and it may not be all that nourishing, but psychologically it would be nourishing from a standpoint of, I'm going to get through this night. And if I was with the goats, we'd probably all huddle together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've thought of that option, and a lot of that thinking it is kind of a carryover from search and rescue days of carrying out bodies or warm bodies that needed assistance to get out, and who had spent the night, and they looking back on it saying, what would they have done differently? They would have brought backup batteries for their flashlight, or cell phone, or more water, or more layers of clothing. And it's just kind of, preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever activate solo?
Yeah, I do. And it's to the chagrin of my wife, but I'm having to convince her, hey, I've got the Garmin InReach, I got this, I got that, and yeah, but she says, if you're unconscious, how are you going to use that? And I said, well, that's a good point. So, pardon me?
So that goes.
I plead that I'll be extra careful and not take any chances. And so when I'm out alone, I'm really looking over my back and thinking, okay, is it going to be smart to step on this rock that looks like it's balanced right on the edge? In this picture here, Steve is holding up his logbook and saying, hey, I've got my logbook full, get over here and stop taking pictures. And so I obliged him and got over there and got on the air. Matter of fact, I was working ZL1BYZ, and I was videoing who was it? I can't remember now. It was a DX station, but I was videoing the KX2 to capture the audio so that I could, share it with him later. Because it's really fun. I find myself when somebody sends me an audio clip of how I sounded on a peak, in their warm ham shack while they were chasing me. It's really surprising to hear how I sounded on the other end. And so I try and do that a lot. By the way, I do record all my sessions, my SOTA sessions. That's my form of logbook. And then when I get back the next morning, I sit there with a cup of coffee and just kind of relive the experience again. Matter of fact, sometimes I can hear that blue jay in the pine tree above me scolding me, and you know, it brings back. You close your eyes and you're almost right back there on the summit. So,
How long of a time do you normally operate at any one time when you're up there?
it can be anywhere from 20, 30 minutes, you know, if the weather is not real pleasant, or there's a storm approaching, or it's just we're concerned about getting back down and want to make sure we've got more time to, you know, navigate the rock pile like we've got here. And a lot of those rocks are loose and they're big. So there's a lot of factors. Probably the most contacts I've ever made is close to 150 chasers that showed up, and that varies with weekend versus weekday or holiday. And so it's and band conditions and the weather on the summit. You know, if it's really nice weather and hardly any wind, and it's comfortable, and you know, we've got a great location, great view. Who wants to go home? Let's play radio as long as we can. So
is there a lot of SOTA special events that go on that you operate, or do you just strictly go out just for the fun, for more contacts to make?
yeah, I tell you, it's a strong addiction. I'll go maybe a week without, you know, going out, and after a week's time, I start getting SOTA fever, and I gotta, you know, I'm texting my friend Steve or other friends that I've gone out with saying, hey, what are you doing next Tuesday? Let's go find a summit. And then it's, you know, the search of which summit have you not operated, because the activator can only operate one summit in a calendar year and get points for it. Whereas a chaser can operate or can contact one summit a day. Can't work the same summit twice on the same. I mean, you can work it, but you won't get points for it.
Oh, okay.
Same with the chaser. He can, like, because of COVID, I went up and operated Mount Hermon for 40 times this year. I only got points for that first activation. But the points for me are the hike and getting up there and having all these friendly chasers that want to get points for me or points for them for contacting me. And that pile up is really an addiction. It's a lot of fun. And after a while, you get to know the first names of everybody. From there, you remember the calls, and you remember, oh, W0MNA, that's Gary, and then his wife Martha will chime on later, and it's a lot of fun.
How many summits have you operated on or activated?
Right now, 450.
And how many are there in Colorado?
There's 1,750 summits, and there would be more. Because they have two rule, what are they called? In order for a summit to qualify here in Colorado, it has to have a prominence of 500 feet. That is from the tip of the mountain down to the nearest col or saddle, without touching anything else around the mountain. Has to be a minimum of 500 feet. But in some states, they go by the 100-meter rule, and that's 329 feet. Florida, of all places, doesn't have any summits that are that high, except for a landfill that's over 350 feet. But I'm not sure I'd want to operate on top of a landfill
Yeah.
and be staring down the junkyard dog that probably is used to protect that place.
So,
So,
do you have to be on top of the summit or close by to get points?
you have to be what they call in the activation zone,
Okay.
and that can be close by. It depends on the geography of the summit, and it's the activation zone is 80 feet down from the top of the summit. But if the summit is real broad, that 80 feet down could be, half mile away from the actual summit.
Yeah.
So
'Cause I don't know. I would
And-
want to climb that high. You get up and do.
when Summits on the Air first started, they had a silly rule that you had to carry your gear into the activation zone to operate. But later on, they wanted to be inclusive for every ham to be able to, get involved in the program.
Right.
And so you can drive to a summit today. There's lots of drive up summits. I mean, Pikes Peak, for example, is you can drive to the top of it, or you can take the tram.
Yeah.
And have your gear in a backpack. And but the only rule that they wanted to enforce was you can't be touching your automobile or mode of transportation to the summit, because the hard rule that they want to enforce is not using any fossil fuel to power your setup. They want you to use a battery or be portable, if you will. I mean, you could bring a hand generator and sit there and generate electricity, just so long as it's not using fossil fuel, or using your car to support your antenna.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Steve, I had a gear
if I may.
question.
Sure.
Thank you for doing this, Steve. This is Bill in for WLC. This has just been absolutely stupendous. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll only ask one, not to tie it up. Have the goats ever knocked down your antenna?
Oh man, yeah, that's a story in itself. I was early on. I was up on Mount Herman, and I was talking to a guy on the HF PACnet, and I had an FT817. It was sitting on a rock, and the microphone I was holding in my hand, and I look up, and there's these here in Colorado we have these deer flies. Actually, they're kind of like horse flies. Anyway, when they bite, they draw blood. They're bad news, and the goats hate them. Rooster was goat napping at the base of my buddy pole Versity vertical, and the coax was kind of curled up down below it, and he jumped up after getting a horse or deer fly bite, and somehow his foot got tangled in the coax. The first thing he did was head the opposite direction from where I was sitting, and all of a sudden I see the Versity vertical pull over, and it hits the ground, starts dragging along the ground. Well, it's attached to the back of the 817. The 817 as it's jumping off the rock, I'm saying, 73's got a QRT, as I'm jump over the rock chasing the radio. And after that, I made sure that the goats there wasn't a chance of them being involved in getting tangled up in the coax or the guy lines. And I also, the goats like to chew on stuff. And I set up, another time when I set up my rig, I couldn't figure out why the SWR was kind of strange. Well, I look over, and Rooster's got the coax in his mouth and he's chewing on it. So I learned a trick there, and that is I took some bear spray and sprayed it into a rag and I wiped down all my coax with, the bear spray. And after that, they don't get near it. But the lesson I learned there too is when you're handling your coax, wrapping it up, putting it away, don't go wiping your eyes or your mouth or pick your nose. Because that bear spray, even though it's dry, it still, wicks onto your fingers and hands. Yeah, another story that I just remembered is we were hiking up the trail, and here comes a family, an infant and a little girl that was probably about 4 years old. And she looked at Rooster and said, pointed at him and said, "Cow?" Because he has that kind of black and white. And I said, "No, sweetie, he's a goat. His name is Rooster." And she kind of looked at me cross-eyed like, "What?" And pointed at Rooster again and said, "Cow." And he said, "Yeah, okay." But yeah, hiking with goats is it's like a traveling circus. I mean, if I were to do it over again, instead of, if I was back on my teen years, instead of getting a hot car, I'd get a couple of goats. I mean, I could fill my little black book with phone numbers every time hiking up the trail or come across a couple of women hikers, and they say, "Oh, is that a goat?" Yeah, it's a goat. And, "Oh, can we take pictures? What are their names? Can we feed them?" It's an icebreaker. It's probably the same thing as having a big giant puppy dog. They just they're chick magnets. That's what they are. So here's Steve trying to unravel the knot for the SOTA flag. And again, at 2 miles above sea level, your brain is checked out. And he does want to take his gloves off because the temperature is about 10 below with wind chill. And it just takes a lot of patience. It takes you twice as long to do stuff at altitude than it does at sea level. So we finally got the flag up, and you can see it's bending the mast over and trying to get on the air. Sometimes the clouds come right down on top of you, and sometimes they can impede your progress by the fact you can't really see that well where you're going. But you're watching your feet really closely, every footstep. Rooster was a real trooper, man. He would go and go and go, and he wouldn't be far behind. But there were times when he would plop down and just say, "Oh man, this you get these packs off me." But I knew it was time to let's find camp soon. Or I'd just rest a while and then give them some treats and carry a little collapsible rubber dish that I can, give them some water with. And a friend of mine, his wife has a vinyl cutter and makes t-shirts. She made me this cool shirt. And I'd get questions, emails all the time on the internet from people saying, "Well, where'd you get that hat? What kind of hat is that? What kind of sunglasses are those? Are those gaiters you're wearing? Why do you wear gaiters?" So I just kind of took one of these pictures and just started labeling everything. And then when Rooster passed away, Mike, 85A, is another SOTA friend that I met and did some activations with. He's also a guitar player and he writes songs. And he wrote this, he called it the Ode to Rooster. And I don't know if you can read it all, but I'll run through it. Hold out your hand in the nothing that's there. All the world's voices are filling the air, making from many lands one. Reach for the signal, see who it might bring, actors or astronauts, children, a king, daring adventure about anything. It's all ham radio. Let your voice spring out to the world. Your soul did ring. Thanks, Rooster. We love you, SK. Anyway.
Very nice.
So I'm afraid we came to the end, guys. If there's any more questions.
Steve, I had one more question real quick.
Sure.
Have you developed any kind of preference in masts in terms of operating in cold weather, like fiberglass versus carbon fiber?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's about the it's about the fact that in the middle of the pile, all of a sudden your antenna telescopes downward. And I haven't found a solution for that other than like bringing some tape, like electrical tape, and wrapping each joint. But yeah, that's kind of a pain. The other trick I found is if I let the mast warm up, in other words, get it out of my pack and lay it on a rock in the sun and let it warm up, and kind of normalized the temperature. Or if the temperature is cold, in that case, it takes on and cools down. So when I extend it, I do a little twist, which sometimes can be difficult when you're trying to collapse it, because that twist kind of locks it. And I also pack a little piece of plastic cloth that's used in like the bottom of a silver drawer in your kitchen, or it's sometimes used to unscrew jars. I've got a piece of that in my MacGyver kit. By the way, it's important to carry a MacGyver kit with zip ties. I've got a Bic lighter in there that doubles as a little couple pieces of solder. And I don't know what else is in there. There's an assortment of goodies that I've learned over the years of having with me, because Murphy always shows up when you least expect it. And again, being prepared, having stuff you can MacGyver your way out of a failed activation. So
have you ever carried solar panels or anything like that, or just because that you're going up there for such a short time to make the confirmations that it's not necessary?
Yeah, I have a panel that's this little plastic panel is rated. It's I think it's rated at 5 watts. It's one of those battery keeper panels, and it's really thin. It's lightweight. I've used this a couple of times to bring up it puts out 18 volts, by the way. And it's a good match for like a 600 milliamp hour, one of those little
Lithium ion.
Lithium ion, there you go. And, I've a couple of times where I just wanted to take one battery, or only had one battery that was charged up. I brought in another battery and used this once I got to the top to bring it up, because I knew it was going to be a fun day and I wanted to stay up there as long as I could and make sure I had enough battery. but we also, that's another thing. In the truck, I've got two plastic boxes with snap-on lids, and I've got, like a 3-season tent. I've got sleeping bag. I've got blow-up sleeping bags. I got enough stuff I could spend 2 or 3 days out in the woods and still be comfortable. I've got supply of water. I keep the water in the cab though, because I don't want it to freeze. And I've got freeze-dried meals. We have a real party out there for 2 or 3 days while the sheriff and his crew of Jeep guys are trying to make their way to us to drag us back up to the road or whatever it is the rescue is. So it's pretty much my story.
Cool. Hey, what kind of camera do you use? You've had some wonderful photos here.
Surprising. Well, I do. In the days when I was shooting video, I kind of, when HD came along, wow, what a difference. I mean, I went from standard definition to high definition, and it was like, holy cow, I better shave and comb my hair. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
High definition is just amazing. And I used, I still have a little Sony, I forget the name of it. It's a point and shoot camera, but it has a setting on it where it has a setting where you can change the normal to what they call vivid color. My wife always complained that my videos look like they're souped up or they're not natural. And I said, it's natural to me. That's how the world looks. It's intense color. And, but, some people have asked me, what camera is your favorite camera? And it's the one I have in my pocket, because the moment the goats decide to chew the coax, or the moment that the antenna's fallen over, or roosters chewing a hole in my tent, is not the time that I need to pull out the suitcase with the Nikons and the telescopic lenses and try and screw all that stuff together and then take a picture. It's being able to pull that cell phone out of your pocket, point and shoot, and you capture the moment.
Yeah.
And the cell phone technology and the amount of pixels that you can get nowadays in cell phones, I'm hard pressed to match that or exceed that. I mean, 12 pixel cameras, and chances are you're not gonna blow it up to a 8-foot by 10-foot poster. At best, maybe a 10 by 12 print that you'll hang on the wall. And it's plenty good enough resolution for that.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions? Well, fantastic. Steve, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been a wonderful, very educational presentation. We can't thank you enough.
Hey, well, thank you for being such a great audience and asking some really good questions. And I've had fun. It's fun sharing your passion. I have to say that, Summits on the Air has been a culmination of all of my passions in a package that is keeping me alive and healthy. Every time I go to the doctor for my annual physical, it's like, he says, "Hey, are you still climbing mountains and beeping out Morse code up there?" And I say, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, don't quit." He says, your chart, you look like you're 50 years old. And I'm 76.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. That's awesome.
So it's good stuff. Get outdoors and play radio, guys. And thank you.
Thank you so
Steve.
much, Steve. That was just totally awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Great job.
Hope to see you guys on the air someday.
Hey, yeah, I was gonna say, hey, my burning question, but I thought it all through. So I no longer need to ask it. You pretty much strictly do CW, correct?
Yeah, but you know, in my KX2 pack, I have a lot of my little parts and pieces organized in little plastic boxes that I get at the dollar store.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's not as small as this little, but it's close. I've got a tiny little microphone.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it's got a push to talk switch on it. So, you know, I break that out every once in a while. And when I either know somebody that's going to chase me that doesn't do sideband or doesn't do CW rather, I'll break that out and post, do a self spot and say, hey, I'm on 20 meters on, you know, the high end of 20 meter sideband and looking for some more contacts.
Well, I'd certainly like to chase you one day. I'm waiting to visit Thorsten in Germany, who you spoke with, to get a Yaesu 857. And maybe this is my inspiration for going code, because I'm sure I could pick you up wherever in Virginia with the worst compromised antenna. And I want to make that my goal. I bet Alan AG4BA will do the same.
Cool.
Working towards that, yeah.
Same here.
Excellent.
So that means now all of you who said, yeah, that, and I know Alan does this, we'll have to add both K7PX and WG0AT to our SOTA app of choice, which mine will be SOTA Goat, and that'll be inspiration too. Hey, he's always out there. I've got to reach him sometime. So you will be hearing from me, sir.
Great. I'm looking forward to it, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
My pleasure, guys.
All right.
Be well, be safe.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Steve.
Hey, Thorsten.